presentation. Next, I would like to call Miss Arnavi to talk about the novel Wonder of Sweets. Wonder of Sweets is written by the very famous poet R.K. Narayan, who refers to a fictional village called as Malkudi. In every novel he writes, he uses the fictional village called Malkudi and the uh, background of the Indian culture and the politics. So we now see how Arnav is presenting about the novel Vendor of Sweets. I give the side to Arnav.
The Vendor of Sweets by R.K. Narayan. Novels are the forms of realism written based on the author's individual experience and the things which are highlighted in the author's mind. Novels are always written based on the fictional character in order to mirror the moral values through them. The Vendor of Sweets is also such an amazing novel written by R.K. Narayan, who is the most famous writer in India. Most of his novels are based on the fictional North Indian town Malgudi, where we can find this novel as well. Here, the Malgudi is very beautiful town where the Mali and his father are living, and this novel is based on four main characters, uh, such as non-heroic hero Jahan, his lovable son Mali, a cousin who claims the Hassanhood around all over the town. Grace, who is half American and half Korean girl, come with Mali from America. Vendor of Sweets is about the living style of Jahan and his son Mali after the unpredictable death of Ambika. Here, Ambika comes as a fictional character who is the caring mother of Mali and the wife of Jagan. There are many themes focused in this poem. The major themes of the novels are generation gap between two generations and the cultural difference between two cultures and the economic and political situation of the past India. Readers can able to glimpse the old India through this delicious novel. Narayan successfully brings out the biggest traditional difference between our culture and the European culture. Let's analyze the chapter 1. Chapter 1 is full of introduction of the four main characters, Jagan, Mali, Kasim, and Ambika, and the supporting characters such as four cooks, front sail boy, watcher. I mentioned novelist mentioned in this novel as a captain, and the Englishman, Mr. Noble. The novel starts with the quotation that conquer the taste and you will have conquered the self. Um, it fires the curiosity towards the readers to continue their reading. The novel says that the listener was introduced as the cousin, and the real name was not mentioned in this novel, but everyone called him as cousin because he climbs cousin court all over the city and helps everyone in their personal needs and personal works. And according to this information, it's clear that the cousin didn't have a fixed position or profession in his life to earn money and manage his livelihood. And skip this sense and move to the next sense. Here, Jagan offers prayers to the goddess Lakshmi and offers string of Yasmin in the top of the frame. And the author further says that it's the Jahan's habit to pray God in mornings and offer the prayers to the God. According to this para, we can understand that Jahan strongly believes in religious values in his lifetime. We all know that Lakshmi is the goddess for the wealth and property. So another critic says that Jahan may pray the goddess Lakshmi to get enough money in his life, and the prayer of the Jahan described in this novel adds both visual and tactile imagery to this chapter. This novel says that it's Hassan's habit to go to the kitchen around 4:30 and taste all the sweets which were made in that day. It shows the eagerness of the cousin to taste all the sweets which were made in that day. It shows the and we can understand that there is no objection for cousin to go into the kitchen and taste all the sweets in that place, even though cousin is not a relative or friend of Jahan. It shows the strong and the power of the cousin in Jahan's sweetmeat shop, and without any blood relationship, Jahan call him as cousin. And let's move into the another sense. And in this sense, Jahan asked the cousin that, "Did you taste the new sweets which cook experiment today?" Cousin replied, "Yes." But the Jahan said that it's not seems to a new sweet for him, because he said that it's an old recipe just in a new shape. And this conversation encouraged his readers to think about the characteristic of Jahan. Here, Jahan seems to be a blind believer of Gandhi's philosophy, and Jahan started to blow his daily meal routines to the cousin. He further said that he had given up salt since that morning, and it shows the Jahan shows that how Jahan control his meal according to the and the health fitness of his body. And the cousin's definition for the natural source adds the humor sense towards the readers. Readers can view cousin through the world of humor, and Jahan further says that he has given up soul too. It's ironic that the owner of the sweetmeats gave up to eat sugar in his life, and he intake honey and greens as his daily meal. Then when we glimpse the next paragraph, it talks about the appearance of the Jahan. He was slight and elfish. Elfish means the appearance related to the elves. Elves are small creatures and have a big nose, big ears, and the appearance of the Jahan is compared to the appearance of the elves. Then Oda says that Jahan has whitening bristles in his face through this line, and we can through this line, and we can portray the oldness of the Jahan as well. And here Narayanan told that Jahan is 55 years old, and Jahan says that being in front of the mirror is intolerable European culture, and it shows the firm ignorance of the Jahan towards the European culture. And the writer says that Jahan spun the clothes by his own hands, even 1 hour a day, and it indicates that Jahan has a self-sufficient lifestyle. Jahan is a person who inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. So the writer says that Jahan started spinning for 20 years, and further it paints the lifestyle of Indian and how they manage with what they have in their hands. And the novel further says that Jahan delivered the excess bundles in the local handloom committee in exchange for hash, and Narayanan says that Jahan felt sentimental thrill when he get money for his handwork, even it was less than 5 rupees. Narrator says that Jahan wears yellow almond-shaped glasses, and he looks through it. He always looks the world through its rims. And further, he says that he wears jibba and dhoti. It shows that Jahan is a traditionalist. Moreover, Jahan wears the shoes which were made by the skin of the dead half and half. He said that I do not like to think that the living creature should not like to living creature should not have its throat cut for the comfort of my feet. It is also the philosophy of Gandhi, and we can understand the humanity of the Jahan through these lines. Moreover, narrator says that the Mali, who is the apple of Jahan's eyes, is a happy supporter for his father in the tanning activities in the past. But another lines indicates the dislikeness of Mali's mother for the tanning activities. As I told you earlier, the name of Mali's mother was Ambika, and she fully ignored the activities of Jahan in the back veranda of their house. Then the writer portrays the changing of the Mali in the following next lines. Mali changed fully opposite from his character in the past. Now he hates his father and then supports in his tanning works. He regrets the smell of the tanning activities as well. And by telling this incident, Narayana draws the changing of our behaviors day by day. When we look at our past, we all know that our preference of the things are totally different from our current situation, and it may be the reason for Mali's sudden changing. And another critic says that Ambika, I mean, the Mali's mother's sudden death is a reason for Mali's change in his behavior. Mali maybe think that his father is a major reason why his mother died very fast and unpredictably. So we can able to view these lines in many ways. Finally, we all know that this novel is the best example for the transformation and the development of the children in our society and the conflict between the father and the son, and here cousin creates the communication breach between Jagan and Mali. According to this chapter, we can understand that Jagan comes as a money oriented person. Even though he regret sugar in his life, in his meal, he owns his sweet meat shops of the purpose to getting money. So it's irony that the person who knows the dangerous effects of sugar owns the sweetmeat shop. And when we glimpse our eyes in next point, we all know that Lakshmi is a goddess for wealth. So according to this, Jahan's daily prayer indicates the money-minded character of Jahan. He offers to the goddess Lakshmi to get enough wealth in his life. And the author says that Jahan didn't like to show his incomes to anyone, even though to his cousin as well. It also indicates the money-oriented character of Jahan. And according to this above statement, we all can understand the character of the Jahan produced in the starting of the chapter in the vendor of sweets. Thank you for hearing.
Thank you, Arnavi, for your wonderful presentation. Next, I would like to call Master Sahityan to present about the poem Waris Kind. Kind is written by the famous poet Stephen Crane. Uh, in this poem, it shows the sadness and the sympathy towards the dead people in during the wartime and the witness of the war. And it is under the theme of war and the uh, violence of uh, the war, and it is very irony that the war is very kind. So let's analyze the poem War is Kind. But so I give the hand to Sahityan.
Good day to you all. And today I'm going to talk about the poem War is Kind. So the poem War is Kind was written by the famous poet Stephen Crane. So as well as we had to talk about the poet. So Stephen Crane, he was an American poet and an author also. He was also a retired U.S. military correspondent who engaged in the major wars like American-Spanish War, Greco-Turkish War, and Cuban War. So may this poem reflect and also talk about his experience in the battlefield as well as. So the Crane's work is often thematically driven by a naturalistic and realistic concern, including the ideals versus of the realities and the fear and also the spiritual crisis. So these themes are particularly evident in the Crane's first three novels, that are Maggie, a girl of the streets, and also red, the red badge of courage, and also the George mother. So the three main characters search for a way to make their dream come true, but ultimately suffer from the crisis of identity. So crime is always fascinated by the war and death. So as well as a fire, disfigurement, and fear of courage, and also all of which inspired him to write many works based on these concepts. So as well as in the novel, in the Red Badge of Courage, the main character both longs of the heroics of the battle, but ultimately fears it, demonstrating the dichotomy of courage and outside. So he experienced the threat of death, misery, and also loss of self. So the Crane's poem, which is he preferred to cold lines, are typically not given to the much scholarly attention as his fiction. That not anthology contained Crane's verse until 1962. So although it is not certain when Crane began to write poetry seriously, he once said that his overall poetic aim was to give my ideas of life as a whole so far as I know it. So he wanted to share his experience and his idea towards the people. So as well as that was the first aim for him to write poems and also the novels. So the poetic style used in the both of his books of poetry, the Black Riders and other lines, and also the War is Kind. So was an unconventional for the time that in the time it was written in five free verse without rhyme or meter or even title of individual works. They are typically short in length, and although several poems such as Do Not Weep, Made in Forest Kind use centers of refines must not. So as well as the Crane also differed from the his peers of poets of later generations in that his works of contains allegory and conflict and narrative situations. So 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 let's get in the poem. So the war is kind. The title is irony because basically the war is not kind. It may impacts many damages and lives and everything as well as. So we have also experienced that terrible, horrible of the impacts of the war, as well as here the war is not kind. It brings many disasters to the people. From the poem, the readers can imagine that the poem impact of the war, that how the people separates the war separates the lovers, fathers, sons, and mother. So when you see the poem, there are five stanzas in the poem, and each stanza carries five lines. So the poem is in a third person narration. So it creates a sadness of the soldiers as well as the readers can create and depend on the sympathy on the point of view of the readers. So the poem talks about the victimization that there are no winners in the war, there will be also losers. So in the first paragraph of the poem, as well as the stanza, so the speaker addresses an unmarried woman consoling her about her dead soldier lover. So he explains that how her lover died in the battlefield, that he had fallen down the post and he threw his hands towards the sky to get help from others. So the explanation is seemingly not worthy enough for a dead soldier in a battlefield. That he repeats the statements of the not weep and Boris kind may suggest the way how to authorize to cover up the real truth behind the war. through the repeated words, they try to rationalize the death in the warfare. That they they tries to cover the death in the war zone. So the title alerts us to the ironic tone of the poem, as well as it is very difficult to imagine war is being kind in any way. The opening stanza conflicts that tone and it addresses the lover of a soldier who has died in a battle, telling her not to weep at his death. So we are then presented in a melodramatic image of the death, that with the dying soldier throwing his hands towards the sky and also his afraid horse running alone. So since this poem was originally published, the image of the riderless horse galloping away from the its fallen owner has become a staple of the Western movies. So we can imagine the whole sequences in our mind. So the poet has successfully used the visual imagery to show the readers how the lover of the maiden has died in the battlefield. So, as well as the second stanza, the speaker now presents the more generalized images and statements about war, as well as he may experience these things, as opposed to close up the image in the open stanza. So, these lines convey a sense of the soldiers' cruelty and resignation as they fight with a flag, as they always say, the unexplained glory flying overhead. So the speaker continues with his bitter irony when describing the battlefield where 1,000 crops lie. The great battle god allude to might be the Mars. So here the writer has used a connectivity between the Roman mythology. That according to the Roman mythology, there was a god named Great. So he was the god of battle. So the Roman mythology they call as the Great. So this stanza, along with the fourth, functions of as a refine, as its third and sixth lines are the repeated in search of the chorus. So the Greek tragedies of chorus comment on the characters of and also the events, frequently making the moral judgments about them. So these lines underscore the senselessness of the war and also the touch the crane's attitude towards the stupidity of the military, that he adopts a concerning tone towards the soldiers as well as describing them as a little souls. By saying that these men were born to drill and die, the speaker at once draws attention to the speakers. So it is very important that not to that in this sense the speaker commands that the military as a whole, while in the first and third and fifth census, he remains sympathetic to the individual victims themselves part of the military. The rhythm and the rhyme of the censa and the fourth also underscore the ironic nature of the poem, as well as the experience of the war and dying. So usually we can see this sensor in our nowadays because the army higher officers brainwash the younger to get them into the army. So these are the words which they use to brainwash the youngers. So the next third stanza, in this stanza, the speaker implores a daughter whose father has been killed in a war not to cry. Again, we are presented with a close-up and a graphical image of the dying soldier, this time tumbling in the yellow strangers and bounding his chest desperately before dying yellow. So here the writer has used two colors that the yellow can read of a number of the ways in the passage. So the first, it may denote the life-affirming image of the sunlight, underscoring the tragic irony of the soldier's death. But yellow is suggested sickness and also disease. So and it's quite easy to see that the soldier falling among the bodies of the comrades. So the thirdly, the color it is a color associated with the cowardice, a theme which Crane explores in the red badge of courage. Giving to the ironic tone of the poem, the first reading seems to be appropriate. So the tactile images here, the words, we can see the words tumbling, tumbling, raging. So also emphasize the physicality of the war, and it's also told on the human body. So As in the second stanza, we are presented with an image of flag. This time, the sweet of blazing, the fireness of the description leads into a refine that these men were born to tell and die, underscoring not only the brutal nature of the war, but also society, a world which programs human being for particularly malicious purposes. So Crane believed that in the large part, human beings' destinies are determined by the biological as well as the social determinants, and that free will play only a small role in our lives. So Crane emphasized the clinical view that the men will do what they told is right when he says point for them the virtue soldier. So make plain to excess of killing. The tone of is not only ironic here, but despairing the as speaker describes something he thinks can be no way. So here the men has been shown as a programmed robot that the soldier he has to do what the high officers say them to do. So they were trained well to kill the other people. So the line make plain to them the extent of killing. So they not to do the construction. They were doing the destruction of the people. So here the writer Souls talks about the pain and the senseless of the war. So the last stanza of the poem that the simile in the first line, mother whose heart hung humble as a button, connects the mother's mourning, which is the smallest detail of her son clothing, filling with the comparison with pathos. A button is humble because it is very small and unseeming. This comparison also emphasizes what Crane sees as the unimportance of this smallness or victims of the war to power that be. The poem ends with the mourning of a mother of her fallen son because this is a relationship, perhaps more than any other, carries the highest degree emotional resonance. So so when we see these are the analysis of the each by each stanza. So as well as we have to talk about the main theme of this poem, as well as the poem talks about the cruelty and senselessness of the war. That in the poem, Spinner's poem War is Fine, a speaker addresses both the dead soldiers' love once the personified flags and the drums and his regiment, insisting the former that war is kind, and to the latter that the word the war is glorious. All these trying declarations, however, are juxtaposed with the realistic images of the battle war. Suffering showing with the war is actually cruel and senseless. Its hello appeals to giving the family members and inanimate objects, the poem it says not just war's horror and cruelty and the indefensibility. So the poem as well as the soldiers' loud ones are full of irony. So they show that the war has been the opposite of kind. The speaker addresses the soldiers' maiden and the babe and also the mother in turn out, outlandishly claiming the worst kind and instructing them to not to weep. Yet the details of the speaker offers to the dead soldiers' family to make them it clear that the soldier dead when they came home to his family is a brutal sword. So war is brutal. The poem thus suggested and the soldier's family has been every reason to weep. Likewise, the poem appeals to the drums and the flag of the soldier's unit, ironically claim that the war is glorious and while showing the opposite. In the between addresses to the soldier's family, the speaker addresses the gear of the soldier's regiment, items designed to make the army scene impressive and grand. So the speaker invokes them as if they can help confirm the glory, virtue, and also the excellence of war. But at this time, he twice describes a field of where a thousand crops lie, an image of senseless carnage. Again, that what the poem says in the indirect contrast to what it shows. It presents the glorify of the war, yet portrays war is appalling. So the poem makes it points even the clearer by addressing its defenses of the war to listeners. who can possibly be convinced. By extension, it implies that any defense of the war is abstract. So family members giving their soldier might be understood that the war is necessary, but not that it's kind. Meanwhile, in the inanimate objects can't be of something at all. So the appeal to the family sound hopelessly insensitive, while the appeals to drums and flags sound ridiculous. So these qualities once again signal to the reader that the poem means the opposite of the way it was. So overall, the poem satirizes the pro-war sentiment. So through it claims an evidence of the glory. So it doesn't show heroic battlefield scenes or the cause. So instead it shows the beloved young man dying grimly alongside 1,000 crops. So the poem's ironic realistic view of the war is typical of the crane who writing the red badge of courage. So aim to puncture romantic needs of the expose the hard social truth. So these are my analysis of this poem. So thanks for hearing me.
Thank you, Sahityan, for your wonderful presentation. Next, I would like to call Master Devigan to present the novel Vendor of Swiss first chapter. In the first chapter, Vendor of Swiss by A.K. Narayan, he gives the real character of the protagonist, Jagan, and some introduction to his son Mali, and the main character cousin. He Even though he is not the original cousin of his Jahan, he seemed to be very related to and communicate with Jahan as a cousin. So let's analyze the first chapter of the Vendor of Sweets. I give the chance to Devi.
Battle-XIII was written by R.K. Narayan, and the main character of this novel is Jagan. Jagan is the vendor of sweets who owns a sweet mart and where sweet meals are prepared and sold to the customers. At the beginning of the chapter 1, we learn that Jagan is a very religious person who offers prayer to Goddess Lakshmi every day and every morning. He lives by the adage of conquer, taste, and you will have conquered the self. Also, the narrator frames that the fragrance of Jagan's prayer and incenses he offers to the goddess mixes with the smell of the sweet and gives a good smells all around his shop. And the person who listens to the Jagan throughout the chapter 1 is called cousin. There is no name mentioned about this cousin, and it is obvious that everyone in the town call him cousin. He usually visits many places and houses in the town from morning till night. He has no permanent profession, so that he does nothing to earn his livelihood. He himself says that he has friends and relatives all over the city, and everyone wants him to attend to fulfill their needs. Jagan doesn't mind that cousin's habit. He happily welcomes him whenever he comes to Jagan's sweet mart. And Jagan is 55-year-old man, and he looks slight and elfish. His brown skin is translucent, and his hair falls in a couple of speckled waves on his neck, and his chin is